The Ma'ariv Aravim prayer, which we just heard sung so beautifully and which praises God for the creation of day and night, is recited at each of our evening services on Shabbat, festivals, and indeed every day. It declares, Borei Yom V'Layla Golel Or Mipnei Choshech V'Choshech Mipnei Or, the Almighty One who is the creator of day and night, who rolls light away from darkness and darkness away from light. Day and night, light and dark, these contrasting concepts, these opposite images, which can both express and evoke different emotions within us. For example, the light of the Shabbat candles can make us feel warm and safe and secure, whilst our sages teach us that we have angels who accompany us back home from synagogue on Shabbat to protect us from the dangerous dark. Or if you're me and you're lucky enough to have just returned from visiting your family on the other side of the world in a totally different time zone, you're not quite sure what is day and what is night, and leaving you a little disorientated, at least for the next few days. More, or just as importantly, in the week prior to being back in Australia with my family, I was visiting many of our teens and our children up at the spectacular Camp George. With our Ma'ariv Aravim prayer in mind, I wanted to reflect on our time with them and how some of the stories that they shared brought these two opposite sides of the coin, the day and night, the dark and light, together. The first comes from the dark, quite literally, from that rainy and cold Shabbat afternoon spent sitting in the ulam, the drama hall, with droplets pelting the glass windows and clouds shifting and swirling across the afternoon sky. It was Community Leadership Shabbat, in which members from the broader camp family, such as educators and clergy, mostly from the Toronto area, are welcome to join for the weekend to get a taste of what the summer has entailed. As part of this special Shabbat, the organisers, the lay leaders, had arranged for two separate but concurrent panels, one of high schooler teens and one of some of the university-aged staff, to speak of their experiences on their campuses since October 7. Golel or mipnei choshech, and the lightness rolled away from the dark as these students described a rather bleak situation. Admittedly, I was so saddened to hear that what should be such a fun and formative stage of life, full of friends and even some learning, had been so soured in the wake of the current conflict. Every student described the implicit and explicit experiences of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment they had dealt with, from physical attacks to snide comments in class and in the hallways, to some hesitation over singing Israeli or Jewish liturgical music for recitals. One of them was studying music as a major. And to mezuzahs being ripped off the doorways in the dorm. Some of you may have heard of this happening at Queen's earlier in the fall. Two of the high school boys had actually been in Israel on October 7 on a program, and hearing their first-hand recount of living on that horrible day and sheltering and then dealing with the aftermath back home was harrowing. Plus, dealing with social media. Each of these students, with their varying ages and interests, mentioned how much harder social media had made their lives, with many simply deciding not to use it anymore. These teens and young adults furthermore confided that they held a pit in their stomach for the end of the summer coming up so soon, when they would need to return to school and face whatever the next semester would throw at them, with none of them having made a transfer or moved schools or institutions. V'hoshech mipnei or. Yet the light rolled away the darkness in continuing the conversation with these admirable young people, these future leaders of our community. Each of them described on that note what a boon their Jewish communities had been for them at this trying time, whether it was the friends from camp that they could lean on both up at Maple Lake and back home, the Hillels they had joined, the Shabbat dinners they were attending, and so on. They were so unbelievably grateful also for the break that camp had given them, even if that meant just being away from their phones and the internet. With that, they expressed their gratitude especially for the opportunity to be in the safe bubble that camp was providing, where they could live their authentic Jewish lives and be relieved from some of the tension of the outside world, if only for a few weeks. The embrace of community and of camp had given many of these students the confidence and courage to return to their regular lives, more sure of who they are and where they come from. One student described how they loved, ultimately, living on their campus in Montreal and had found a small group of Jewish friends to host Shabbat meals and commiserate with. This same young woman also described the comfort of being able to simply use terms like bubi and zaidi without any explanation, the kind of scenario where those who know will know and won't need to ask questions because it's part of their shared lexicon. Another described how he had just joined the board of his Hillel in Ottawa and was participating in a fellowship with Stand With Us, for which he'd gone to LA at some point over the summer. Yet another described how she'd just bought a new Magen David necklace, and her friend next to her nodded and mentioned how she'd told her grandparents off for warning her not to wear hers. Each of them vowed to keep educating and advocating for their proud Jewish identities and their Zionism, whether in the classroom or online. The Jewish future will be brightened by their light. Uma'avir yom umevi laila, umabdil ben yom uvein laila. The day passes and brings on the night, and the day is distinguished from the night. This brings us to the contrasting darkness of that grey, stormy sky with the bright warmth of the sun just the night before on Friday night when we gathered outdoors in the Beit Tefillah for the Kabbalat Shabbat services, that special and sacred, distinguished time of week. Towards the end, we lit the candles, said Kiddush and Hamotzi, and the spirit of Shabbat was easy to breathe in as we soaked in the sunset, surrounded by the beauty of the water and the pine trees and the serene sounds of the music and the lake. Up at George, they put their own spin, their own distinction to this Shabbat ritual of Hadlakat Nerot. Later in the evening, following the song session, a big deal up at camp, with its music and laughter and dancing and general ruckus, the youngest campers were dismissed from the basketball court, where this song session was being held. A small tekes, or ceremony, followed called Candles for Israel. So let me explain. This Candles for Israel idea was the initiative of the Mishlachat, the contingent of young Israelis hosted by Camp George during the summer. Camp was blessed this year to have 25 young Israelis in total, the largest group they've ever had, which was a point of light in and of itself. It was incredible to see the way that they were such a force up at Maple Lake, integrating as counselors and specialists and helping set the tone and culture of the camp in a way that they had not previously, perhaps due to their numbers and, of course, the situation. And they learn about Canadian Jewish life as we learn about their lives in Israel, too. The Candles for Israel piece went a bit like this. There was a set of tea candles laid out on a table, much like this, in the number 115, the number of remaining hostages at the time, as well as another set in the shape of a Magen David, self-explanatory. Different people were then invited to light the candles, including my faculty group. Afterwards, one of the Mishlachat would tell one of their stories connected to October 7. That particular week, one of the young women spoke about her brother, his picture projected onto the side of the basketball court where we stood, who was injured serving in Gaza and had been undergoing rehabilitation at the Tel HaShomer hospital, who've been doing amazing work, amazing treatment, by the way. It was moving, of course, to hear this story, but even more moving to see the way that the other campers reacted. From jumping around and just being rowdy just minutes before, the kids were now dead silent, not a whisper to be heard around the circle. We must be doing something right, I thought, if for all their rambunctiousness, the campers understood that this was different, a time reserved for respectfulness. It was the quietest I saw them all week. The Mishlachat ended the proceedings this Shabbat by singing a song entitled Ad Machar, by Tomorrow, from the popular Israeli artist Evyatar Banai. Although it was released over a decade ago, the words sound as if they were written exactly for today, and I'll share just a couple of stanzas. Rechaka me'abayit hashvil lachzor nimchak holechet ad chevel dak. Away from home, the road back is gone. You walk on a tightrope. Halelot arukim bli leda'at lama borechet ve'ein rodef. The nights are long without knowing why. You run and there is no pursuer. Ad machar od me'at, yeled ratz alayich mechabek otach. By tomorrow, so soon, a child would be running towards you, embracing you. What a perfect and poignant song for this moment, both more generally in the history of our people and in that unique camp context. The lyrics perhaps capturing perfectly what our students had been trying to say to us all along. That for them, and maybe for us too, being Jewish in this world right now is to live in a twilight zone. There is darkness in the hardships we are facing, but light to be found in the fact that we are facing them together. There is then comfort in knowing that each of us, younger and older, are simply trying to chart a course among the confusion and complexity towards a brighter horizon. For our children's sake and for ours, may it be one where u'mesader et hakochavim, where the stars feel in order once more. Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. Blessed are you, O God, who turns light into dark and dark into light. Shabbat shalom.